Hey, it's Mark here again, and in this video we wanted to address customer expectations. Whether you're a vendor or a consultant or a business owner, you've got contractual relationships and maybe some handshake relationships with some of your vendors and customers. And with some recent experiences, we've learned again a couple of areas with regard to managing expectations in business that we thought might be helpful for just about anybody out there who touches on business at all. And one of the things that is critical is when you engage in a business relationship that you set very, very clear expectations. And the tendency is for people not to do this because some of those discussions are hard. Some of those discussions people can say no to. Pricing discussions, terms discussions. The tendency for a lot of people is to say, well, let's kind of dance around those a little bit because those are hard discussions to have and we don't want to alienate the customer. It's the worst thing in the world you could do, because if you engage in a relationship with false expectations or nebulous expectations, I will guarantee you 99 out of 100 times, maybe 100 out of 100 times, it'll create more work and it'll cost you more money.
So one of the things that we've run into is that, and I think this is fairly universal no matter where you go on the planet, no matter what the size of the company is that you're dealing with, the customer wants something extra for their money. They want the best deal they can get, and the vendor wants to give as little as possible for the maximum amount of money. And the issue with this particular scenario is that you have to reach terms that are win-win. If I'm going to give you, twice as many services for the same amount of money, then I'm essentially working for half my regular rate. And if I can't pay my bills on that, then it doesn't make sense for me to take you on as a client. And the opposite is also true. If you can get something that's valuable to you for $50, why would you pay $100 for the exact same thing? So you can't get yourself into a scenario where you're willing to do extra work for less money because you're just trying to win this one client, and that's going to lead to all this extra work, because that's speculative. You really need to get on an even ground and on the same page with your customers.
We've seen this over and over and over, and I'm being hypocritical because I've made the mistake myself, as experienced as I am and as many times as I've done this. I guess what it comes down to, it's no different than a relationship, right? It's no different than any relationship. It's no different than developing software programs or putting a business plan together or doing business strategy. That upfront work, when you can't touch and feel that check coming in, that revenue, the work that goes into preparation and planning, part of it is expectations. People want to move away from that work and get to the deal. And, yeah, you might close a few deals, but if you do that loosely and you don't set those proper expectations and both parties don't come out with a win, I guarantee it's going to kick you in the ass at some point. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when.
I used to work with this guy, and I was doing IT help desk kind of stuff, and we had this guy that sold for us, and he was forever calling us up and saying, hey, I need you to do, whatever. And I would say, well, we just can't do that. And he'd say, well, I already took their check. I already promised them that we would do this. And he never would consult the actual people who had to do the work before he would price a job. And it got us in a lot of trouble. And recently we had a scenario with a customer who had a previous web designer and a previous SEO guy, and had run into some issues and was sort of jaded and wanted better service and wanted more results. And so we bent over backwards for this guy and worked more than we would work for the average client for the amount of money that he was paying us. And at the end of the day, he was still unsatisfied.
Yeah, I mean, he wanted more than what we could give him. And he wanted different things than what we could give him. And we need to take responsibility for the fact that we either set those expectations improperly or we allowed those expectations to form. So in either case, the lesson is, if you do the hard work up front, do the planning and the strategizing up front, then come to an agreement where both parties win. Otherwise, you will lose that business, I guarantee it. And that segues into the last topic, which is you can't do this on a handshake. Even if you're doing business with friends, because if you set expectations with someone and then you walk away from that person and you both agree, you look each other in the eye and you say to each other, yep, that's exactly what I'm looking for, that's exactly what I want. If that is not put on a document and captured in perpetuity that both parties sign, I guarantee you one of those parties will come back to that situation and say, that's not what I said, or that's not what I heard. And it's not an integrity issue. It's people just, they're busy and they remember different things, and communication is an interesting animal. Document it. It's not enough to have the expectation discussion. Put it in writing and get it signed.
If you have business relationships right now that are handshake relationships, go write something down. Go sit down with that person and say, this is not a trust issue, this is a communication issue. I want to make sure that we're on the same page. And when you're writing things down, I promise you will find discrepancies between what you thought and what they thought. Work those things out so you can preserve those relationships.
And if you're going into any new negotiations here in the next few days or few weeks, really think this over and make sure that you don't do yourself or your potential customer a disservice. Go in and do the hard work. Walk out of there with very specific expectations.